Hey there, it's your girl. It's your girl, Bijane Kareem, the grant guru. I'm excited to have you tonight for just 10 minutes so we can talk about all thing grants. And specifically for tonight, we're going to talk about lesson plans versus grant applications. All right. So before we get started, I want to talk to you a little bit about who I am and my organization. So as I said, I'm Bijane Kareem, the grant guru, representing BK International Education Consultancy, where our mission is to strengthen educator practices to best serve youth. And we do that through a couple of ways, through program management, curriculum and instructional design services, as well as continuing education and training. And our services are for pre-K through 12 school communities, youth and parent organizations, as well as government and nonprofit. And we're on all socials. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter at BK Consultancy, we're on IG at BK underscore consultancy, and also on YouTube and LinkedIn. So stay connected with us to see what other resources that we share for educators. And for tonight, our objectives are to describe what grant funders are out there, who is giving out this money, and to also find out what are the grant funders looking for in a grant application and how that is different or similar to a lesson plan. And the overall intent and outcome is just to help build educators' knowledge and confidence to be able to grant write to increase student supports and fully stock your classroom. So let's get into it. Let's take a look at grant funders. So there are four categories that we're going to touch on tonight. The first one is government. So the government is the largest funder of grants. The entity that gives out the most grants are government grants. And let me tell you, these are what we call the most complex grants. Usually the request for proposals or the applications are 50-page long, and you really have to have some skill in order to go after these. All right, but they are out there. Another place to go for grant funding are corporations. So, for example, corporations will give out funds or resources that you don't have to pay back. And it could be monetary things. It could be gift card for their retail, for example. It could even be volunteers from their staff who help support educational causes. So that's another place where you can check into for funding for your classroom or for your school. A third is to look into foundations, nonprofits, and charities. So, one thing people may not realize is that a lot of foundations have been started by corporations. So, corporations will take their earnings and maybe donate anywhere from 1%, maybe to 3% of their profit and their revenue into a foundation, a nonprofit, to give back for social good. And so, that's another place for you to go to tap into classroom funding. And here's an example of one. And I'm sure you can think of other foundations and nonprofits or charities out there that give out grants. And then last but not least, which we talked about this a couple sessions ago, is crowdfunding. And we consider crowdfunding a grant because it qualifies for the definition. One, it's funds that you don't have to repay back. However, whatever that you put in your crowdfunding application, it becomes a contract. People are expecting you, your investors are expecting you to carry that out just as such. So, crowdfunding, we also consider as a grant. And here's an example of one that specifically helps support classroom teachers and educators. All right. So, we talked a little bit about grant funders, right? Where to go, who's giving out the money. Now, we want to talk a little bit about how can educators leverage their lesson plans to be able to write a grant application, whether it's for the government, corporation, nonprofit, or for crowdfunding. A lot of teachers don't know that they already have the basics for grant writing, and I'm here to show you that today. So if you look at this Venn diagram here, what do you see? You see two bubbles, one with lesson plan on the left, and then another with grant application over to the other side. And so if you look in the blue circle, this is where a lesson plan is completely different from a grant application. And as you notice, there is not much difference. There is not much difference between a grant application and a lesson plan. One major difference is that a lesson plan usually should include some level of differentiation for their students. Now, there are some grants that may require differentiation, but for the most part, that is not a factor for the grant applications that we're referring to for classroom teachers, right? But in terms of how a grant application is completely different from a lesson plan, if you look over to the far right, you see a budget. So usually in a lesson plan, you do not include a budget. However, it may cost teachers some things or the school some things in order to implement that lesson. But if you look in the middle where the two circles overlap, the lesson plan and the grant application, there are a variety of things that overlap and are the same when you design a lesson plan versus when you are writing a grant application. So what is similar is both should be based off a need. What are the need of your students that you're writing this grant proposal for, or you're creating your lesson plan? What are you trying to address? Right? What are you trying to teach them? What do you want them to learn? What behaviors do you want to change? And then from there, in your grant application, just like in a lesson plan, you should have goals and objectives, right? Goals are your overarching things that you want to accomplish, and objectives are a little bit more specific in how you're going to um, get to those goals. You also have activities. Activities are those learning activities or those events that's going to help to accomplish the goal and objective. And then what materials will you need to carry out that lesson plan or grant application? Is it books? Nowadays, is it PPE? Is it a computer device? Is it a computer software? Is it manipulatives? Could be a variety of things. And grants can actually help you get those things to fully stock your classroom and to help drive instruction. You also, for both, for a lesson plan and a grant application, need to consider what is the timeline? How long is a lesson plan? Is it just one lesson period? Does it expand over a week? The same thing for a grant application. How long will it take you to successfully complete your grant project that you are proposing? And then last but not least is evaluation. How do you evaluate or measure your lesson to confirm that your students have met the goals and objectives that you had laid out before? Same thing for a grant application. How will investors or you know that you successfully met your goals and objectives of your grant application? So, as you can see here, a lesson plan and a grant application are very similar. And so, educators really do have the foundational skills to be grant writers, great grant writers. So, I just want to show you that again, just to help build your confidence and give you encouragement into writing either your first grant or writing more grants. All right, so now it's time for the audience to ask any questions. So in the last 2 minutes, what questions can I answer for you about grants or anything that we covered? Let me see if there are any questions in the chat. All right. All right. I have one question is how long does it typically take to write a grant application? That's a great question. And to be honest, that's going to vary on a variety of things. So one, it's your level of experience. Two, it also is going to be based on what type of grant funding application you're going for. So remember earlier we talked about those different funding types. Is it a federal grant? Is it a crowdfunding proposal? Is it a foundation? So that's also going to factor into how long it may take you. So your level of experience, what type of funding application it is, as well as are you writing by yourself? Are you writing with a team? And is this your first time writing for this particular grant? So a little secret that I have to tell you is that usually what I do is I focus on one thing each year and continue and write for that particular type of project over and over and over again and shop it around to different grant funders. And it makes that time for me to write the grant application actually less. So that's a little tip and trick for you all today. So I would also like to share that for those who are checking in today, you all, because it is the holiday season and I am in the spirit of giving, you all can get a free copy of my book, 12 Quick Steps to Writing Winning Classroom Grants on Kindle Unlimited. So, in partnership with Amazon and Kindle Unlimited, you can get a free copy today of 12 Quick Steps to Writing Winning Classroom Grant. And if you look at the little link below, if you go to tiny.cc slash teacher tips, teacher is capital, tips is also capital, you can get access to this free resources to give you even more feedback and coaching and guidance and tips and tricks on how to write a winning classroom grant and fully stock your classroom. Right. Also share it with your friends, share it with your educator friends as well. The link again is tinycc slash teacher tips. And say you're not an educator, right? But you're in the spirit of giving, please consider donating to our Buy Books Change Lives campaign. And you can reach that at www.bkconsultancy.org slash buy books change lives. And what we do is we actually, your donation, your sponsorship will help us to donate a physical copy of a book to a teacher here in the US. So we look forward to seeing you again on the last Tuesday of the month at 7 o'clock, only for 10 minutes, where we give out some tips and tricks. Thank you all. Have a good night.